So I want you to think about what you're actually doing if you just happen to come across this video, which I'm sure you won't. I'm sure that this is being wiped out into the atmosphere of nothingness. But when this gets into the proxy mind that you may not even be aware that you are fully invested in, and that is by you not following certain people, you know what you're doing to that person. You know that they have extended themselves to develop a concept, an idea, and they need crowdfunding. And the crowdfunding comes from the viewers. And the viewership has to be sponsored eventually by advertisers. And it creates this rhetoric, right? But the only choice you really have is whether or not you vote to keep someone alive or whether you vote to kill them. And when you are not watching, it sounds really extreme, but it's the truth. You'd say, oh, they have other jobs, they have other things that they could do. No, they are acting out a very casual, nonchalant, because they're expected to. This is all part of the medium that's expected. That there can't be any humor, any true humor. If you look at the disclosure and you look at the subject matter that's thrown before us, humor is the number one thing that's being destroyed. So you could say, oh, no, I like to laugh at movies. But how much do you often laugh? Belly laugh is going a little bit too far, but how often do you go into bliss, right? Felice. You get into this joyous state and you laugh with a sort of purity. Well, the truth is you don't, because everything are these sardonic sniper negs, right? These negative roast, right? That's what our humor is based on. And we have to let it out to this agonizing sort of catharsis in this sort of psycho drama that we're all stuck in together. And much of this laughter is like based in very dark, seedy areas where we must laugh at the potential of corruption. We must laugh at a situation that, if we were to really break it down, is bringing light to something that would invariably destroy an entire family just by the sheer implication of the suggestion of it. That's funny. In movies, this type of humor is pushed forward. And so what this does is this takes your joy, this takes the levity away, and it gives you a false concept of humor and levity, you know? But what I wanted to say is that when you don't watch, like how easy it would be for you not to death scroll and to know, or doom scroll, but it really is death scrolling, right? How easy it would be for you not to buy into the propaganda, into the Edward Bernays machine, right? Into the symbolism, even though you full well know this is going to entertain me, but it's AI. This is going to entertain me, but this person's full of shit and has thefted, stolen, taken all of the humorous bites from someone else, right? And reappropriated it, gone through this sort of digestive process and amalgamated it into a societal acceptance, right? And it may seem like I'm talking about an abstract concept, but I'm not. It's what you're doing right now as you watch this video and go on to watching others, because you're bored, right? Let's face it, you're bored. You're trying to avoid the real talk. And when you go over and you look at the real talk, it's even that is being proposed. It's being presented by somebody who you tend to like the flavor, you like the way they look, or they're just highly generic, right? They're not affronting, they're not assaultive to you, not in their manner, not in the way that they look, but yet they said the same exact, so it's a method of delivery, right? So thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people now are dying off because you're not interested in their content. And by proxy, you are voting for somebody. The number of views, the amount of advertising, that's where the markets go, right? But the markets are heavily being dictated by an outside observer that is working just fine within the matrix of the human element, right? Our communication, what we accept. A really good example of this is if we were to go back and we were to look at very respected authors, and they were put under the specter, under the rush light of today. We all know that the reason they rose to prominence was all the information that you did not know about them. All the questions that weren't asked, all the very polite, or you could say maneuverable techniques they use to make their interviews rare, to answer only certain two-bit or pre-canned answers to certain questions, and to solidify that, like Tom Cruise, right? I'm only going to answer these questions. If you try to break off and go non sequitur, I'm going to slip into this very aggressive demeanor, even though I'm a 5'6", all of 155 pounds of wrinkly old skin, and I couldn't back up one of my aggressive affronting, and even picking like Trump, even picking only certain interviewers to interview you, ones that you could look at the psychology and say, I could break through that person. It just matters in that 30-second snippet that I have defamed this person, and then the crowd enjoys it, right? And even the person who's being put down, the company that employs them, will say, no, I want this to be on the front page, or I want this to be, national news, because we know that the advertisers are going to love this shit, and we know exactly what products we're going to be able to push here, right? And what I'm saying is we hold the power, we hold the keys to be able to elevate those that you could say you feel sorry for them. Why should I feel sorry for them? You see a mother who's, so we're very selective, right? But I was going to say, you see a mother who's trying to teach Spanish or cooking or something like that because she's not aesthetic or communicating in a particular way. And this is what pushes people toward this sort of mancy, to where they're seeking favor by unseen forces, because it becomes obvious that there's certain powers at play that select and choose without delicacy, right? Without a certain harmony in mind, but harm, harm in harmony. It's like, yeah, it's definitely serving that purpose, because it's not allowing the flow through and the continuation of whatever we think this human element really is that we need to pass on like a torch to the next generation. And the fact that we would even talk about bringing a next generation into this strange environmental situation that we have called Earth, that we have said that we have a certain history, and now we're beginning to realize that everything is completely synthetic and completely fabricated, right? All the way down to the very structural elements of the room that we're in, and the design of the couch that we sit on, and the time and placement of where we are, right? There's something extremely digitized and synthetic about existence itself. And yet we can't bring ourselves to breaking through that paradigm and saying, everything that I do is going to be done for the greater good of humanity. No, you think you are still selecting who is chosen to at least survive another day and to have food on their table. But the truth is that something is working through you. Is it an outside agent, or is it the way that we have been engineered from the beginning? That there's no way for us to break through, again, go non sequitur, to make choices that better serve humanity at large, and the organic, oftentimes unpleasant, unattractive aspects to human beings. That you would support somebody who doesn't deliver well, right? Who doesn't present themselves well, who isn't some sort of generic aspect of what you will accept because it's palatable today. You not until people get to the grimy truth right? And even somebody who seems entirely hideous, and they're brandishing their hideousness, like Slavoj Zizek, right? He's this disgusting communist that in his interviews everybody chuckles, right? When he says certain things that are very psychotic. But because he has this, yes, because he goes through these certain cadence, because he talks about things that you don't really know what the fuck he's even talking about. That it's a novelty. It's a fucking novelty. And this strange laughter and this strange cadence, right? You're attracted to that, but you won't listen to somebody who breaks down these items one by one and says rationally, even and most especially Slavoj Zizek has based himself on these archetypes that are insane, psychotic, and taking advantage of you. And yet here you go, you're feeding into the system, feeding into the system. You want to look at the profane, you want to look at the heinous. You want to step back and say, I'm a viewer from outside the machine, and somehow my mind has been selected as this arbitrary mechanism to evaluate and be an accountant for humankind. Well, you're not. Toe isn't theories of everything, Kurt Jemungel. No, you're not sitting outside of it. In fact, watching people age year after year on these platforms becomes a fascinating vista, right? That these narcissists would actually even think that they're keeping themselves intact in some sort of time capsule, but time still affects them, and it finds that delicious. Something, to say that it's evil, that's an easy sweep. I mean, it gets into Beyond Good and Evil, Friedrich Nietzsche, then you get into the master will, the master morality, a lot of the things that Michael Tsarian espouses and looks at these days, where he's really looking at this going, no, Nietzsche isn't a good example, and things didn't go well for him. Things didn't end well for him, right? And it doesn't end well for any of us, but he didn't reach any sort of final synthesis or catharsis. The plug was just kind of pulled, and there you are holding this, the end of this string, like you're playing telephone, right, through these cans, and you're left to speculate, well, what would he have written if he kept his cognizance for the last 11 years of his life and stayed alive and was thriving to his last day? What mechanism of delivery would he get? And the guy entirely forgot that he wrote anything at all. And you have to start to look at these so-called great people, right, that you think that you're promoting when you're feeding into the machine by proxy, when you're watching these, when you're doom scrolling, and you tend to go back and you know what you're doing. You go back to certain people and you go, well, at least they're getting these, like Jesse Michaels, right? You know his origins. You know he's just trying to pose himself as Howdy Doody Boy. You know that he's probably installed by a government agency to do exactly what he's doing. You know his connections with Peter Thiel. I do, right? But yet we're looking for information, even though we know it's being spoon-fed to us and it's never going to be delivered by that particular agent, and that agent is actually morphing the information, heavily modifying it, that we want the baby food because it's easily digestible, even though we could survive if we were willing to develop some teeth and go through the painful process of getting that food down, right? That maturation is at the root of all this, right? But to look at this and to say that there's a certain entertainment in the hideousness of one destroying themselves through public spectre, right? And that's really the fascination. It's almost like looking at these gladiators or the Spartan and realizing that only the bourgeois aspects of society end up there in this fascinating revelation that we're watching our own demise and we want to eat popcorn while we go through this, right? So, long story short, in summary, you could support people that are more like the latchkey the businesses. Right? I'm kind of mixing two concepts together, obviously, but there's a methodology and a reason for that. But I digress. When we look at these mom and pop businesses that no longer exist, the mom and pop businesses, the offspring of these people that would have inherited these businesses, right? The local tienda, the local store, the supermercado, right? The little the butcher's market down on the corner that no longer exists. Well, those people were forced into the Edward Bernays advertising specter, and they have their own YouTube channels today, and they're having to subsidize their income because they're driving Lyft or they're driving Uber into poverty. There's not enough food, right? And there's not enough high quality food and good food, and food's getting extremely expensive as packages get smaller and smaller. People are not getting the calories they need daily, right? They're not supporting one another. Everybody is shrinking back in fear. And when you look at this, you could help the majority of people. As you doom scroll all day long, you could be watching and searching for channels that, if they were able to get 50,000 subscribers or be able to get some sort of support and go on to that next level and offer possibly better videos through the technology that they had available to them, or the ease of just having enough food in their stomach to be able to deliver that information that's a little more attractive. If you were to actually go through the process of searching those people out, even though you didn't like them, even though they were ugly, even though they were old or didn't meet a certain prerequisite, if you were to do all that you do based on the humanitarianism that you propose to yourself that you already have when you know you don't, you could save the world. You could show whatever this entity is or whatever these aliens are that you aren't just some cybernetic mechanism, right, of Metcalfe's law that is just playing out and repeat the same information through a different taste pattern, right? You hold the keys. In summary, you hold the keys, but you want to be entertained. And even after watching this, if you thought you made a decision to go into and look up people that on whatever platforms you tend to go back to that nobody would be interested in, promote them and try to bring a few dollars to their dinner plate, which is all you'd ever do after millions of views. It would just pay out a few bucks to keep somebody alive. And that's the situation that we're in today, right? And it's always going to end up the same way, because entertainment, the illusion, is what's being sold. And the vitriolic specter of putting people down and the comedy of death and horror, that is really what you're attracted to. And I think, even though I poke fun at Slavoj Zizek, I know I mispronounced his name, but I don't give a fuck. I really don't. Why should I care, right? Why should I care when somebody is really just capitalizing on a sensationalism and reappropriating information that many other people have brought light to? But because you can't understand him, because it's so weird, because it brings entertainment, because he's pushing communist ideologies and communist concepts, but he's just weird enough. But is he brilliant, or is he a fucking freak? Well, hiding behind the mask, your mask, of how you like to reappropriate the way the people that you worship. Remember, worship really comes into who you're paying attention to and who you're feeding. That becomes your God. And I would hate to see the physicality of the God that we've created here today, right? I would hate to see that.